first presentation this afternoon focuses on advancing women in construction. It'll be moderated by Gretchen Gagel of Women's Thriving in Construction, a global institute, Steve Dora of Toyota, and Kim Neuscheller of Turner Construction Company. Their complete bios and slides are available in the app, so please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
So quiet in here. You know, I figured out that I'm either after lunch when you all are ready to go to sleep, or I'm right before cocktails, which is what I was speaking the last time, right? But we will manage and get organized up here. Thank you. All right, so yes, I am Dr. Gretchen Gagel. I'm really thrilled to be here this afternoon with all of you. So many friends in the audience, and so great to see you all. I am going to have our panelists just give a quick introduction of both of you, if you would take a moment to do that.
Sure. Hello, my name is Kim Neuscheller. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Turner Construction Company. I'm responsible for our Tampa office. Started my career in architecture in New York after graduating Rice University in Houston. And been with Turner for about 23 years now, practiced architecture for about 8, so 31 in the business, and I still design on the side for friends and family, so I have the best of both worlds. I get to build really cool buildings with Turner and then still keep my design hat on, so it's a little bit about me.
I'm renovating a new home in Kansas City, so you shouldn't have said that, Kim. I'll be calling on you for that. Great, Steve?
Yeah, Steve Dora, Senior Manager in Facility Projects at Toyota. I've been with Toyota going on my 21st year now on the plant construction side.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to make some opening remarks before we start diving into questions with the panelists. And I would encourage you to come up with your own questions for the panelists as well. The tougher the better. So many of you I've known Greg Sizemore since the 90s. I've known many of you for a long time. And you may or may not know that my career with FMI and Continuum Advisory Group, I spent time advising large owners like a Toyota or a General Motors or an Intel on how to think strategically about how to deliver billions of dollars of construction. And I did market expansion strategies for construction companies and engineers. So people have said, well, Gretchen, you spent your whole life advocating for women. Actually, no, I've just been a woman my whole life, and I've been a woman who's really had a great time in the construction industry and loves construction. Then I got a little crazy, and I moved to Australia. In 2018, I had a bright, shiny new PhD in leadership. I had no idea what I was going to do when I got there. I didn't realize, hey, we don't make any cars in Australia. We don't make any computers in Australia. There's no Intel, there's no General Motors, there's no nothing. What am I going to do over here? And I started teaching. And Quanta Services was a client of mine in the US, and they said, yeah, we have 5 companies over there. Join the Pipeline Association. So I joined the Pipeline Association. They say we want to do more for women. I started a women's leadership program. My friends back here are like, you run a women's leadership program? You've never run a women's leadership program. I'm like, well, I'm in Australia, and it seems to be the thing to do. And we just closed out the 10th cohort of that pipeline group. We run it in the crane industry, and that's when I approached the Construction User Roundtable about running a women's leadership program here in America, which we're kicking off cohort 3 tomorrow, and I want to thank all the people in the audience who support sending people through that program. Then another crazy thing happened, and Wiley Publishing came and asked me to write a book about women leading in construction, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, my career is definitely taking this turn, right? So I'm on a book tour right now, Building Women Leaders, a blueprint for women thriving in construction. And I have to tell you that the best thing that happened to me this morning was a gentleman walking up to me and asking for my autograph, me to autograph his copy of the book, and how much, as a 45-year veteran of the industry, he appreciated the book. So men out there, this is not just a book for women, it's a book for men too. So then I started thinking, gosh, the universe is telling me something, right? And I was inducted into the National Academy of Construction in 21, and I thought, I'm not sure I have anything left to prove in my career. Maybe I'm supposed to be helping women in construction, right? And it's not just a women's challenge. So this is a piece I wrote for this new global institute, which Andy, we just changed the name of it. It's now a different name than what you introduced it as, the International Institute for Women in Construction. It's about the sustainability of our industry. I was in a high-rise hotel in Vegas 2 weeks ago. Both elevators were out in my tower, both. You had to call security and get a security person to come up and take you down in a service elevator. Do we think that's a safe situation in a town like Vegas to not have elevators? So we need talent. We face tremendous shortages. I spend half the year in Australia. I'm headed there Saturday. We're short 300,000 in Australia. We're short somewhere between 750,000 and 1 million here in America. And women are part of the missing piece. We're 11 to 15% of the overall construction workforce, typically 3% or less of most of the trades and 10% of senior leadership. You know, I was chair of the board of a $250 million contractor, and I never met another woman chair of a contractor. So it would seem that helping us bring more women to attract them, develop them, and retain them in construction would be a good idea. So I also have started this new nonprofit. We've been a nonprofit for 7 months. We finally got some money for branding. That's why we have a new name, the International Institute for Women in Construction, IWIC. That's our website. We have 4 studies up there, and we have a lot of prominent male leaders. The president of DPR Construction is on our board. The former CEO of Skanska is on our advisory board. Tom Riley, president of Turner, is on our advisory board. Because men, we can't do this without you. We can create sisterhoods, but you're the ones that are really going to help us excel in this industry. This is our first study. The numbers are a little hard to see. China's in the lead with 16% female. The UK is at a little under 15%. Australia's at 13%. I've sat on their construction industry culture task force for the last 5 years. America's at about 11%. You can see most of the South American countries are at 4%. We did a study on the trades in the United States. So these are the trades that are showing an increase in female participation. But you can see that those numbers are still pretty low, right? So we've gone from like, I don't have a monitor here, so I can't really see the numbers, but roofers have gone from 1.2 to 2%. How do we get the unions, the associations, the major roofing contractors, people like Walmart that have a lot of roofs together and figure out how we get more than 2% female roofers? These are the ones that are actually going down. So we've seen a decrease in female participation in these trades in the United States. So just a little bit of context about why I feel the conversation about advancing women in construction is so important, how we attract, develop, and retain women in our industry. Is that helpful as kind of an overview? Yeah, and if you're thinking of starting a global institute, talk to me first, because it's not for the faint of heart. I keep a pet dragon on my desk because somebody told me I still have dragon slaying years left in me. So yeah, it's been an interesting process. All right, so now I'm going to shift over here, and we'll have I'm going to turn this just a little bit so I can see you all. And please do come up with questions as well. So Kim, I'm going to start with you. Why are we still having a conversation? How many years did you say you've been in the industry?
31.
And have you heard lots of conversations about women in construction?
I'm tired of conversations about women in construction, but yes.
And why? Why are we still having the conversation?
I mean, it starts with the statistics, right? I mean, just if you heard yesterday, 2 to 2.5% in the trades, 10, 11, 12%, in the office or in the professional side of the business. I think we're still talking about it because we're still trying to figure out the formula to attract, retain, and promote within. It gets, it's challenging. Women have it a little different than men in that, like, their anatomy is such that they have to make a decision at some point in their life. Are they going to have children or not have children? And that is often part of the reason we're still having a conversation about women in construction. It's not a decision that most men have to make, although some make that decision also to stay home with their children. I think, it's just how do we make it more attractive? when do we start talking about it? I'm finding that if we start younger with young ladies in middle school and show them what it could be like to be a woman in construction and the life you can have as being a woman in construction, we'll tend to get more interest. We talk often about how do we make construction sexy again, not just for men to bring the trade, people to want to work in construction, but also the women. Like, why would they want to work in construction? And so we talk about that a lot as a group.
Yeah. It's interesting. If you want to laugh, Google my TEDx talk about my first book, 8 Steps to Being a Great Working Mom. I flew 100,000 miles and had a baby in 96, and then I flew and I had another baby 13 months later. And I told my boss that people were saying really weird things to me, and he didn't believe me, Lou Bainbridge at FMI. And we were standing at a cocktail party, and the owner of a construction company turned to me and said, to Lou, and said, "Have you started looking for Gretchen's replacement yet?" And I'm standing there, right? And I'm like, oh, this is going to get really good. And Lou's looking at me like, should I know something? And he goes, well, the yearnings that she has to have a career are going to be overcome by her understanding where she belongs, basically, because she's pregnant. And Lou's jaw just hit the floor. He could not believe that somebody was saying that to my face. Mm-hmm. So it is an interesting conundrum that we face. It's a little different. Do you have anything to add to that, or you want to jump into our next question, Steve?
No, I think she did great.
Okay. And do you feel like there's areas that we're making progress for women in construction?
Yeah, I think like the panels like this, like awareness, your cohort, your women in leadership cohorts, the other training programs. Again, just awareness into the industry and entry, like. Talks with high schools and getting women starting early. So that is kind of where we're starting early and building on that, I think is where we're doing well.
Yeah, I see a lot, and I'm curious how the audience would feel about this, kind of at that project manager, project engineer, more progress maybe in that middle part. I see some head nodding than we're making in the trades or at the very senior levels. And I guess I would ask that of you, Kim, like where are we not making progress?
I think one of the things that we struggle with at Turner, and we have a whole bunch of discussions about it, we even have a committee kind of working on it and understanding the why behind it, is women in the field and women superintendent leaders. We've made progress in more leadership positions. We're still heavy in the middle. If you look across, in operations, so we've got a lot of female leadership in finance and HR and, other disciplines within what we do, but in operations, and I came up through operations. I wear boots every day. I like being out in the field, and so getting people to understand the value of that and want to stick in that. But running the field is different than being a project executive or a project manager in the field. And let's be honest, certain cultures don't take direction very well from women. It's just the way they're wired, and we do have to have strong field leadership in order to do what we're doing. And so there are some challenges with that. I think, there are women. So I'm going to give you an example. When I was coming up through Turner, and I've been with the company 23 years, I wanted to be a superintendent, but back when I started, that really was unheard of. And the company didn't want to put me in that position because, there was still graffiti on the walls and anatomical graffiti on the walls, right? They weren't the best bathroom facilities, there were things like that. And so the company didn't want to put us in that sort of position. So I always felt like I was behind the 8 ball because I wanted to be a good builder, right? And so what I did was I created opportunities for myself. And I made sure I sat in on foreman's meetings, or went on this punch list walkthrough, or met with the facilities team. You have to create those opportunities when you see that your company isn't doing that. And they didn't do it because they said, Kim can't do it. They did it for a reason. I think they thought they were protecting me and my counterparts. But at the same time, the industry has changed so much, right? And so what I would say is the more we can listen to what the women want, we have to support that decision, because we do have women builders, who want to be in the field, but they're really good at the administration side, or they're really good at the financial side, and so they're getting pushed into one direction, and we lose women because they want to be builders. And so I think the more we can listen to what people are actually asking for, the more we'll be able to help with that sort of thing.
I want to dig into this a little bit more deeply because I interviewed Kim for the book. I interviewed 40 or 50 male and female leaders for the book. There's actually 129 people in the book. I wanted lots of people's Olympians and all kinds of things. I don't remember if it was you, Kim, that said this or another woman that I interviewed. It's like, I don't want to be treated like your daughter. Can you elaborate? I can elaborate on that, but can you?
Well, I mean, I think it goes for a male or female. You want to be treated for the work that you're doing and what you're capable of, and you want to be given the same opportunities as everyone else, especially if you voiced your opinion that that's the track you want to be on. So Turner has now separated, you can be on a master builder track, or you can be on a more project management, a construction executive kind of track. And we have some women who I want to be a builder, I want to be a master builder, I want to be on that track. And so there's more deliberate effort, and I think in our industry we have to take more deliberate action because I ran a $1 billion cancer center project in New York, and on that job, you heard the numbers, 2.1, 2.2% women in the trades. We had an agreement with the building trades in New York City, and New York, it was a little easier to implement because it was a union town, but we had a 15% guaranteed, 15% of all apprentices, there was a guarantee of 15% for women. But there weren't 15% out there who wanted that, right? And so what we did was we partnered with a pre-apprenticeship program in New York. And so on my project, I was able to achieve 6% women. But I had a deliberate program, and I spoke with all of our contractors. But you have to take that deliberate action. Without it, without a set program, without set requirements, it depends on, people don't necessarily want to take a chance because they're not sure what they're going to get. But if you've got those people who are interested, who want to work in the trades or who want to work on the master builder side, if you will, give them that chance, because I can tell you everyone that we hired from that pre-apprenticeship program worked their tails off. And a lot of men don't know this, but women are incredible multitaskers. And so the women that I introduced to my trade partners along the way, they're like, Kim, she's like in a management position now, that they learn to respect and learn to trust what the women were capable of. So it starts with deliberate action, but then it's just believing in the people that you're working with, male or female.
Great. Steve, do you have things to add to all of that? And I'm curious about a man's, I made that comment about I don't want to be treated like your daughter. I think sometimes men don't know how to treat us.
Just make it including women and inclusive and equal treatment, right? Is not special treatment, just equal. Giving them opportunities, stretch targets, leadership opportunities, things like that, instead of, I think last time I saw you, you had the panel with the cohort, and they talked about in meetings how the women are usually the note takers, conscious, oh, here, Savannah, take notes for the meeting. I try this awareness for us as men is to make sure that we don't kind of fall in that stereotypical act, right? So making sure that we divvy it out equally and things like that. So not special treatment, just equal.
Or rotate it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, we think about our language too. When I was chair of the Brinkman board, the CEO introduced me as chairman of the board one day. And I just very politely said, you have three other options: chair, chairperson, or chairwoman. But I am not the chairman of the board. But you would never, that's not malicious. He wasn't being mean calling me chairman of the board, but it's just trying to enlighten that if we start using more inclusive language, just say chair. She's the chair of the board, right? And not the chairman.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I want to talk to both of you. So you hit upon it about making progress and what strategies are working, Kim. But what is working? Because that's one of the things that I'm really focused on with this institute is people don't know what to do. We've been having this conversation for a really, 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 really long time, right? In fact, last year, a McKinsey expert stood up, and I think it was here at CURT, and said we couldn't solve the productivity problem by getting more women in the industry because it was never going to happen, so we had to use technology instead. I had to stand up and say something about that. But what do you see that's working? Steve, do you have things that...
Well, to attract women, it's how we describe the trade. So instead of like representing it as like physical labor, it's problem solving. There's so many different tracks in construction. Like as you mentioned, with your program on our side too, like we have field engineers, we have project managers, we have planners. Like you can really go anywhere with it. So just trying to use inclusive language, not just stereotype like you had to, it's just physical labor. It's just the way to describe the job in a way where it includes everyone. I think is a good part on how to kind of attract women into that field.
Yeah. Has anybody heard of Goldie Blocks? It's a builder set. Anybody else in the audience heard of Goldie Blocks? Yeah, I spoke with her at GWIC years ago. And I'm embarrassed, I can't think of her name right now. But anyway, if you Google Goldie Blocks, you'll see her name. And she went to Stanford and did a lot of research about this pink aisle, blue aisle thing. And this really stuck with me. I mean, this was more than a decade ago. That and men and women are all wonderful, right? This is not about women winning at the expense of men. Can I just say that? I hope you assume that that's not what this is about. But that men will build something just to build something. But women want to know how it's going to benefit society. And I'm not saying men don't want to know that too, but we don't make that connection. When I talk to people outside of construction about why I love construction, I'm like, well, do you like clean drinking water? Do you like charging your cell phone? Do you like driving on roads or flying in and out of airports or having a baby in a hospital instead of out in a field? That's what construction is. And so I think making that connection to the bigger what we build and maintain the assets of civilization. We would not be sitting in this room. We would have not flown in for this meeting if it wasn't for construction. And I think doing a better job of tooting our own horn about that and what we mean to society.
If I could just add and expand on that. So young ladies don't necessarily think of construction, and there's so many different sides of what we do in our daily lives, whether it's the finance side, safety, pre-construction, procurement, risk mitigation. There are so many different aspects of what we do as part of construction. And most people, young men too, don't even realize what we do. And so what I found also to be working with mentoring young ladies, and then also as part of a program when I was building that other project, we did if you see it, you can build it. And there was a whole campaign that was going. And we invited 12 young ladies in their senior year. They were foster children. But we invited them to come and walk the job. And we had lunch with them. And I brought a bunch of tradeswomen into the room. And a lot of our design professionals were also women. And so I had the architect and a structural engineer and some other folks who were also part of that project. And they all sat around the table with these young ladies. We had lunch. We kind of talked about, what the young ladies were interested in. You heard a lot of, I want to be a social worker, I want to be a psychologist, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a teacher. Not one person in that room said, I want to work in construction. And so the building I referenced was 450 feet tall. We had just finished putting the skin on, and we were just fitting out and doing a lot of the MEP overheads and whatnot. And so I take the young ladies on a walkthrough, and then along the way we stop and talk to a lot of women, and you saw a lot of women. And I know I said it was 5 to 6%, but it felt like a lot of women because everywhere you turned there was a woman, and you don't normally see that on the trade side, right? And so these young ladies came in, they talked with a welder, they talked with a pipe fitter, they talked with an iron worker, and so on. And then I took them all the way up to the top and let them see the city skyline. And it was just an eye-opening experience for them. Like, you get to build buildings like this in a city like this, isn't this exciting, right? And so then we went back downstairs and we talked about, what they thought and did they enjoy their conversations. And I said, okay, now who wants to work in construction? And I got 5 hands. So just making them aware of, like, you can do this too. And it's not something that they were exposed to. So the more that we can, share what's awesome about our industry, because we work in a really cool industry. We get to build, amazing buildings and impact society while doing it. So I'd say the more we can highlight that and bring them into our world and show them what we do. Young men too, they don't know what we do, from VDC all the way to, getting your hands dirty and being out there and being a great craftsman. So I'd say more exposure to what we do is key.
Yeah. We are in the process right now of writing a case study in Australia of the significant efforts by government associations and companies to attract women into the industry. So New South Wales is the state that Sydney's in. They funded $20 million over 3 years to get mid-career women into construction. And they did some really unique things with the $20 million. And they just got funded again for another $20 million. So they picked 23 pilot projects and assigned a full-time person to recruit women. 23 projects. And they brought women out 25 at a time and brought them to a job site to show them, accountants and all the different kinds of people that we need, not just technical people in construction. So I thought that was a really interesting example. Anything else to add, Steve, on kind of what's working to get women into the industry? Or how about developing them once they get here?
Yeah, developing. So it's making sure it's intentional development, right? And it, again, like I said before, not special, just equal. So like making sure that we provide them with leadership opportunities and, essentially giving them opportunities like the Women's Leadership Conference and like to bring attention to their, actually Savannah mentioned that she's still texting the people from her cohort, so building that network of women in the industry so that they have a good resource there. And then also making sure that as a company, like our leadership is to know that we need to sponsor, sponsorship for the women in construction and not just mentor, which is good, but like sponsorship too, and making sure that we talk about them when they're not in the room and promote them equally would be another good way to develop.
I had incredible sponsors coming up. So out of engineering school, I was hired as the first female operations manager for Ralston Purina and went and ran a dog food plant in Oklahoma. My sorority sisters at SMU thought I'd pretty much lost my marbles to go to Oklahoma to make dog food. And about 18 months into it, I went to the plant manager, Mark Burns, who I sadly just discovered passed away last year. But I went to him and I said, I'm out of here. I'm tired of the harassment. I walked out one day, it said F. Gretchen in 6-foot letters on the inside of the plant. That's a fun thing when you're 23 years old, right? And I said, I'm gone. I'm out of here. I'm not putting up with this. And he said, give me a week. And he said, and he came back and he goes, I have a cereal plant for you to run, your own plant in Davenport, Iowa. Please stay. Please, 62 men and me. And so people that really raised their hand and said, I believe in you. And then my next sponsor put me in charge of an 800-person plant when I was 27, Ron Earps, who, and so it's this, and it's men sponsoring men sponsoring women sponsoring men. It's all of us helping people live the best version of themselves. But one thing I heard over and over in the book is women not taking opportunities because they didn't think they were qualified enough. Over and over and over. Would you like to share that story?
Yeah, I used to meet with our CEO occasionally, and I was still coming up the ranks in operations, and Peter used to ask me, Kim, when are you going to be a project executive? And I said, when it's time, and they kept pushing. But it's different for women in construction. We do have to work a little harder to be taken half as seriously most of the time. Because of the unconscious bias, not because you're not capable, not because you don't know what you're doing, but because people have this vision or these beliefs of what they think you can do or want to do. And so, I was coming up, and at the time, I was the most senior woman in operations in our company, at least in New York. And he's like, come on, we want you to move up. And I didn't feel like I did the full job yet as a project manager. Like, I wanted to know that I could teach the next generation of leaders coming up behind me. And so for me, because I always felt that I had to work a little harder, I wanted to make sure that I could do the job. I didn't want to just fake it until you make it kind of deal. That was really important to me because, you were responsible not only for, the people that you're leading, but also, you're being entrusted. And me, I was placed on mega jobs. So, $1 billion, 695, million, like, that was a huge responsibility, and I didn't feel like I had done enough yet, even though I had proven that I knew the building and I knew what I was doing. So I tended to take a little longer to get there by my own choice, not because the company didn't push me more. They wanted me to take more, but I felt it was important that I felt I earned it, not just because they wanted it felt like it was like representation. And I don't believe you can replace experience. You have to do the work. You have to put in the time because you have to be able to teach it. And so for me, that was the most important thing. So I got there when I got there, and it was the right time, but probably not fast enough for some in my company.
Yeah. Interesting. Anybody else feel like that they've had like a situation where somebody was pushing you to do something you didn't think you were ready for, and I'm seeing the head nodding out there. Yeah, it happened to me a lot. The other thing that I touched upon this is feeling the responsibility of being the first woman operations manager. What if I screw this up? Like, they're never going to hire another one, right? We tried with Gretchen, and she was a complete failure, so we're not going to do that again. So there is a lot of pressure when you're, thank God at FMI I had Cynthia Paul in front of me, so there was at least one woman in front of me when I started there. How about keeping women, or anything else on developing women? And the women's leadership program that I started, if you would have told me 30 years ago you were sending me to a women's leadership program, I would have been really angry. I did everything I could to fit in. I wore blue blazers and loafers. I smoked cigars when I played golf. I drank whiskey. I did everything to not stand out as a woman. And I actually left the construction industry for 8 years. When my kids were 7 and 8, I just had to get off a plane for a while. And I ran a women's foundation for 5 years, and what a gift. They were selling jewelry in the lobby of the first conference I went to. I'm like, oh my God, they're selling jewelry here. But I dress like a woman now. Like, I don't walk around in a blue blazer and do all the things I did back then to try and fit in. And I think the one thing that women would say that I've heard from women who go through this program is a lot of them think they're the problem. And to be able to be in a room and say, it's not me. I'm dealing with unconscious bias, or I'm not being treated equally, or whatever, and it's not a bash on that. And most of what we just talk about is, what does great leadership look like? That's what they get out of it, is strategy and leadership, and how to have difficult conversations, and how to coach people, and all of that. So how are we doing on time? Does anybody, I realize my watch isn't working. 1:50. Oh, great, we're doing great. And are we going to have, we do have microphones for, okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience, so be forewarned. So we talked about how we get women into the industry, but how do we keep them? Because sometimes I feel like it can be a bit of a revolving door.
To me, I think it starts with culture with the company. So inclusive, again, safe environments, and especially like out in the field. If you see poor behavior, you got to, like, leadership has to step in and take immediate action, and not, if you are kind of complacent to it, or like, oh, they didn't mean that, or kind of downplay it. It's not the intent, you have to take it serious. So again, a safe culture, safe environment. Actually, we talked about it last night about at job sites, like you mentioned, like restrooms, like having good facilities for women and making sure it's a safe environment. And like, if you're working second shift and get into your car, making sure that they feel safe to have that safety there. Then also, like, predictability. You mentioned before with women, like, if you need to be flexible without punishment. It's like, if you need to go home, your kid's sick, go ahead, we'll figure it out. So be flexible without making them feel like they have to forgo that to try to, like, fit in, or do their keep. So that's a few things I think we're doing.
I have so many stories to tell. This is what I love about being in the industry for 40 years. You accumulate a lot of stories, right? But as chair of the board, I always visited a job site for Brinkman every quarter. And I could tell one of our superintendents, male, was getting a little fidgety. And finally the project manager said, well, John needs to leave. I said, great, goodbye. And he's like, well, we're not done with this and whatever. And I looked at him, I said, what are you missing right now? And he said, well, my kid's in a play. And I said, get up and leave this trailer right now. And we have that culture in us, that, the person who opens the gate has to be the one that closes the gate. And I just said, go away. John Holland Group, who's one of the largest contractors in Australia, is piloting dual start times in the morning. So they're going to have a 7 o'clock and a 9 o'clock start because guess what? There's divorced men that have to drop their kids off at school too, or daycare that's not open at 6 o'clock in the morning. So, the things that we can do to professionalize and shift our culture and just think a little bit differently about how we do things. And then I'm going to touch upon the bad behavior thing. So visiting a job site, 150 framers on it, $50 million apartment complex, female project manager. And she told me the story. It didn't happen while I was there, but that one day she thought someone whistled at her. But she went in the trailer and she's like, oh, but they probably weren't whistling at me. They were probably just whistling. And it's like, that's bullshit. Excuse my language. If they whistled at you, they whistled at you. Young male superintendent comes out, pulls every framer down. That's our boss. That's our boss, and you'll treat her with respect. Calls the owner of the company. He totally backed him up, and it never happened again. But I think that's where I say allyship is that's somebody being an ally to someone else and saying it's about respect, because it is about respect and professionalism on our job sites, right? We want everybody to be treated with respect, male, female, green, alien, whatever.
Yeah, when I'm on a job, 2 words go up on the board: respect and consideration. So, and that's the culture, right? You mentioned culture. Buddy system is a big one, right? We don't want anyone working alone late at night, male, female, whatever, because you never know. And in today's day and age, it's a little more precarious, right? So, just the more you can cover for each other. One night you may have to leave early, the next night your colleague may have to leave early. So it's that buddy system and taking that extra care to get to know your team and being a team and covering.
And that it's okay. Like, it's okay to raise your hand and say, I need to go to my son's play or whatever. We normalize that kind of behavior. All right, roving microphones. Do we have questions from the eye? We have one right there from Deb.
So it's a loaded question?
It's a silent question right now, but...
So Deb McNeil. No.
Can we get the microphone, the roving microphone on? Oh, there you go, Andy. Look at you, problem solving. You're in construction.
Thanks, Andy. Can you hear me now?
No, we can't hear that one either. Mr. Microphone.
52B.
There we go.
All right, Deb McNeil, with Dow Chemical for 40-plus years, now with IPA, Independent Project Analysis. I got to tell a story and then ask my question. 6 years ago, I went to a Girl Scout leader, 2 daughters, went to a Girl Scout convention. 10,000 girls, not a single technical company, not a single heavy industrial company, not a single construction company had a table. Why aren't we tying into where girls are naturally gathering and send our messages? 10,000 girls are showing up in DC in July. I hope we're there, guys.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'm in America in July. I can be there.
So how to really understand where girls get together in that age group automatically, and Girl Scouts are desperate for badge content, and we've done a relatively good job with STEM, and damn it, we should have put C in that damn acronym when we started.
So Lorraine Arulian is a former national chair of Girl Scouts and a very dear friend of mine, and I will pick the phone up and talk to Lorraine about how we connect with the board, and that's where we need to think differently. I was walking through an airport again the other day, pink aisle, blue aisle. Have you been in a Lego store recently? Do you know they still have like boys and girls stuff segregated in there and pink boxes for unicorn things? And I was like, okay, I'm going to reach out to Lego. What do you think a girl would want to build that's cool? It's not flowers and unicorns. How about a Taylor Swift stadium or something? I don't know what that is, but yeah, having those conversations. Do we have another question over here? Great.
Yes, Brian Moore. I think maybe a statement of how do we capitalize on this opportunity, because I do think it's a unique opportunity right now. College is so expensive. Going to get your trade is not. You come out with no debt, making a good amount of money. Then you add in the other ingredient, which is this industry is growing by leaps and bounds and will for the next several decades. Then you add the third ingredient. If you send your kid to college, there's a probability that that education may not be here in 3 to 5 years because of AI. If you go get a trade education, you're guaranteed a job.
Yeah. Check out a new nonprofit called Move Over Bob. I've had them on my podcast. And the IWIC has a new podcast that just launched last week called Women Thriving in Construction. Move Over Bob, 2 carpenters, female carpenters, have created a 17-like magazine, and they're piloting it in Phoenix. And it's got really cool content and URL codes where girls can, because they're like, well, okay, now what do I do? Okay, I've seen a cool welder. How do I get in a pre-apprenticeship program? And by the way, 75% of apprenticeship programs in America are still entirely male, like not one woman in 75% of apprenticeship programs. So that's why having the unions, meeting with Kevin at Ironworkers. I've sat in his office, right? Kevin's shaking his head. Yeah, she came and talked to me about this. Meeting with ABC, AGC. I'm talking to the board of CURT. Like, how do we do things in a different way? And Brian, I sit on the CAHUA advisory board, so please don't hold this comment against me because I'm really having fun helping you all think about Australia. But I was talking to a tech company the other day. This is not just about the trades. And I thought, I wonder what percentage of their leadership team is female. And so it's really easy to get on y'all's websites, Procore, CAHUA, whoever it is, and count what the percentage of women on senior leadership teams is. And scarily, one contractor, I just bought a house in Kansas City because I have this adorable 9-month-old grandson there, and I'm trying to make new friends in Kansas. It took me 22 people to find a woman on their website. 22. So one last story, and then I'm going to take another question. Another company that near and dear to my heart just did a LinkedIn post last week of their recent promotions, and I think I want to say it was 13 people, and there was not one woman in the picture. Don't post pictures like that. If you want women to think that you want them to come work at your company, and you post 13 promotions and there's not one woman pictured there, do you think that sounds a strong? Steve, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned like giving them opportunities to lead, right? So like, I did some status checks on our group, and engineer level we're 22% women, manager level we're at 33%, senior manager like my level 0%, GM level in our department 0%. We do have GM females, and we do have our like executive level, C-suite. We do have several women, but I think we need to do more.
Yeah. Well, we have to start with data.
Yeah.
It's about critical thinking. That's why I started today with statistics, right? Let's deal in very fact-based conversations about what the status of women in construction is right now, and let's implement strategies and see if we can move needles. I mean, that's what I'm here to do, and have fun. If it's not fun, I don't do it anymore. So that's the other thing I love about getting old. Do we have another question from the audience? Yep, right over there.
So do you have opportunities for women for re-entry? So there are some women who have their degrees in architecture, engineering, construction management, who get married, have kids, and raise their children, and decide that they do want to go back to the industry, but may have 5, 10, 15 years that they have a little bit of gap. Do you have the opportunity then to re-enter into the industry at a certain level and try to bring them back up?
So I'll answer it this way. We don't have an official program at Turner, but we actually like that, that women who have been in the industry before want to come back. One thing that we have implemented over the past several years is a transition partner. And so, like, when someone leaves, not just for women, but for even if you have to leave for a healthcare reason and go on short-term disability or whatever, your needs prior to your leaving were different than your needs when you come back, whether that's because you're a mom and you need more flexibility, or or you just have maybe some medical needs, you've got to go to various appointments or whatever. And so having someone to partner with and talk to where you may have some frustrations, or you just want to talk through, hey, does this plan make sense? This is what I'm thinking I'm going to propose to my boss, or just having an ally. It's been working for us, and we definitely, Turner is very much into returnering. That's what we call it. But we call people returners when they come back to us. So I'd say, if you've been in the industry and you're interested in whether it's joining your old company or joining a new company, the experience you had before is worth something. But you should be vocal about like what you're interested in, because I've got a lot of young ladies who work with me, in our business unit, and a lot of them are in, starting to have families and whatnot, and they're like, Kim, I really want to have a little bit more flexibility when I come back. I'm like, okay, well, what are you interested in? And as long as they tell us what they're interested in, we can make plans for that, whether it's pre-con, we have Source Blue, which is equipment, and just materials in general. And so having that flexibility where they can maybe work remote, or, come in a couple days a week, and then, or, potentially leave early. All we ask is that you're honest about it, upfront about it, and we can put a plan together. So we don't have a formal program for that, but like these transition partners have been helping us, because it's someone else to talk to, not necessarily HR, not your immediate boss, but someone who's been through your circumstance, whether it's childbirth or something, who could share how they transitioned back, if that makes sense.
I quit my job for 6 months when my mom was in the last stages of Alzheimer's. I had 2 teenagers. I'd just gone through a divorce, written a check for half my assets, and that's when I came back into the industry as president of Continuum Advisory Group. But people leave for all kinds of reasons. I just couldn't take care of my mom and work as a single mother. But I'm lucky that Clark Ellis recognized that I wanted to come back into construction and hired me. Great question. Yes.
Hi. Over here, Anna Peterson.
There's a really bright light right there.
Sorry. Anna Peterson with Day and Zimmerman. I know this wasn't discussed necessarily in this conversation, but I'm wondering whether pay equity is part of the problem here. And when I took over part of the operations for the company I work for, I noticed that we didn't have exactly the same pay for the same work for men and women, and so we've been working to recalibrate that. But I wonder, since you have a broader lens on the construction industry, do you see that? Do you see pay inequities that could potentially be a contributor to not having women want to be part of the construction industry?
You can go.
Okay, so I'll share that at Turner, I can only speak to Turner because that's the company I grew up in. It was a challenge in the beginning. When I was first coming up, I know I wasn't making what my male colleagues were making, and I know I was working twice as hard, right? And so not just in hours, but with the output, right? But Turner has spent years making sure that equity is included, and they've completely revamped. And the other thing that they've done is when we're talking not just for pay, so all pay raises, we do it by a committee. It's not just one person making those decisions. So there's multiple advocates in the room for different people, whether it's male or female. And our evaluations are done similarly. So like, let's say you and I were working together and we had a great working relationship. You work with Steve, no disrespect, but you didn't have a good working relationship with Steve. But like, I can share that you were incredible at your job, and Steve will say, okay, these were some of the, maybe growth areas. And I can say, okay, well, I can see maybe 1 or 2 of those. But like, you've got multiple people in the room. But I can say if your companies have not put in the time to look at the data, look at the work, look at how long in seat, you really should do it, because it's changed how the women at Turner feel about the company, because there was such an effort put into that, and it was very visible. It wasn't done behind closed doors. It was shared, and the metrics were shared. And so like, we know now, and I see it, so it's like, it's very different.
And transparency. And one of the fun things about my PhD, I went down a lot of rabbit holes, and motivation theory was one of them, and equity theory is an important part of motivation, and that's feeling like you're being treated fairly. And I can tell you that at one point in my career, I was asked if I was being paid similarly to my male peers. I'm trying to hide the story of where I was. And I said, what are our base salaries based upon? tenure and responsibility. I said, oh, okay, well, I was hired in between so-and-so and so-and-so, and we have exactly the same responsibility. So my salary must be between theirs. I got a 40% increase. 40% increase. And you just hate to be that person that has to raise your hand. But if you have good data, it goes back to good data that you can explain to people that being treated fairly, that's all people want. I just wanted to be treated fairly. Yes, and how are we doing on time again? Oh, 2:07. Oh, perfect.
Hi, Gretchen. Yes, Jay Moser. I'm retired from an energy major and now working for PTAG, but I used to run a community of practice within the company, right? And I think we were up to 19% women in construction, which was fairly good, according to your numbers. I'm just wondering if IWIC or any of the other groups might consider a center of excellence or a community of practice within your organization that companies could come to and draw from. And that you should be, with your organization, able to get partnerships with universities, with training, with PMI, and some others to help, build the skill sets of people who want to do different things. So I just wondering if that might be something you could do.
Absolutely. We're 7 months into being a nonprofit. I have to remind myself that, but we're publishing white papers 5 and 6, and we have the podcast up and running, and the Instagram and LinkedIn started 2 weeks ago. We have the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology writing this case study in Australia. I'm flying to London and meeting with 10 executives in the UK about what they're doing. This will all go out on our podcast. We have plans for a global showcase where companies can sign up for a half-hour time slot to tell the story of something they did that's amazing, and people can sign up for whichever half-hour time slots they want. Because we are not early adopters in our industry. I know, not shocking to those of you who've been around for a long time. We're laggards. We're the show me state. I was born in Missouri. We want to see 50 different people that have done a certain thing, like dual start times on a project, and then we might think about doing it. So getting those stories out of what's working and partnering with universities, partnering with CII, partnering with everybody. CURT, I want to partner with the world and find out what's working. Nicholas.
Gretchen, I'm going to go back to the last question about pay and equity, because I had a conversation recently. Everyone, I'm Nicholas Johnson with Kahua. I had a conversation recently with a dear friend who got a pay adjustment. She received a pay adjustment because a new CEO came in, did some study, and recognized inequities. So she, along with a lot of her colleagues, got 10, 15% pay adjustments. It wasn't 40, but it was significant. And initially, she was very happy. And then after just a few days, and this was a common, as she tells me the story, this was a common reaction. After just a few days, there was a lot of angst and anger about the fact that since she'd come on board, she'd been undervalued. So with your PhD hat on and with all the work that you've done on this subject, that's a really tricky thing because, I want to give you a raise. This is great.
Yeah.
But somewhere behind that, you have to deal with the fact that for the last, in her case, it was about 5 years, she'd been undervalued. So what's your advice to the corporate, to the chair? How are you going to deal with this? Because it seems like a great thing, but it actually has another effect as well.
It does. And anybody heard of Lilly Ledbetter? That was the first piece of legislation that Obama signed, and I brought her in as a speaker. She was underpaid for years and years and years and years, went all the way to the Supreme Court and lost because there was a time limit. I think that forgiveness, I don't walk around with a chip on my shoulder. I forgive that person that wrote F. Gretchen in 6-foot letters. I actually came up with something very witty to say to the closest guy next to me, which made him blush when that one happened. But you have to forgive, and you have to give people the grace that they're trying to right wrongs. And that, okay, I was underpaid for 5 years, but now somebody's done something about it, and an apology goes a long way. The person who gave me the 40% raise never really apologized to me. They never really said, I'm really sorry that it took you raising your hand to do this. And that would have gone a long way for me. I think we probably have time for one more question. 2?
So I work with a lot of tradespeople, and especially when we have anyone who's coming in new into the industry, and I ask women, like, what made you get into crafts and trades? And a lot of things I hear is, I saw another electrician a woman who was making TikToks about it. So how do you people feel about social media and using that? Because we speak about data and we speak about meeting people where they're at, and less in a, for lack of a better term, corporate-y way, and more in like people like yourself just showing your life, like this is what I do. I have a niece who's on TikTok 24/7, and she learned how to edit videos there. So we know they want to make stuff, right? But having those examples where they're at, how do you feel about that?
Absolutely. I want a hit Netflix series and I want a Super Bowl ad. I want it all. Everyone's like, well, those are expensive, Gretchen. I don't care. Sadly, we were getting our Instagram up and running, and so I started connecting to construction Instagrams, and we have a lot of people posting less than professional pictures of women in construction. So I want to flood the world with the professional pictures of women in construction, and absolutely TikTok is an avenue that we will approach once we raise some money, more money.
If I could just add, like, advertisement in any way about being a woman in construction, it goes a long way, because this nonprofit that I work with in New York, they were the pre-apprenticeship program that I mentioned earlier, and I've met so many women, and one in particular, she was on the verge of homelessness. She saw an ad on the subway in Manhattan about non-traditional employment for women, which is the nonprofit, and she took a chance. She went and she showed up, and within 1 year, she was able to buy her own home and buy her mother a car. Like, she was on the verge of homelessness, like living in the street, because she used her hands and got to build something. And so a lot of people don't realize that construction is the best and fastest way to middle-income America and a very respectful living. So the more that we can share, whether it's TikTok or whatever, Instagram, advertisements where you at least expect them, they make a difference and they change lives. So absolutely agree.
Everybody go link in to Move Over Bob. Then I'll call them all and say, hey, did you just get a bunch of people connect to you on Move Over Bob? Are we wrap up? One more.
I feel like this is a good time to say long-time listener, first-time caller with all of this. I'm a big fan. And recently, I pulled out of the vault, I quoted 12 Angry Men. I don't know if anyone has seen that. It's a black and white film on a jury deliberation, and it talks about all these cognitive biases. And so, Kim, as you were talking about the compensation questions, and, there's these sponsors that are in the room, what kind of training do you all have on cognitive biases? Because you see it in compensation discussions, in meetings, in assignments, visibility. Can you talk a little bit more about what kind of intentional training you have around this area?
Yeah, so at Toyota, we have unconscious bias training. We have anti-harassment training. We just started about a year ago, Mendomi training, which is treating your employees like family, so like not daughters, but like inclusive, kind of the empathy towards your employees. So I think those are a few things that kind of, again, with the unconscious bias, like, it's ridiculous. Like, with the training, you're like, oh my God, I just did that? You had no idea that I was doing that. So, yeah, I mean, we're definitely trying to bring the awareness to all those, the biases that we have.
Can I share a funny unconscious bias story before we go? So it was 2:30 in the morning. We were doing a very large concrete pour, and I had to handle a situation down the block. I was working that night, and I go down, and one of our workers is getting into it with one of the neighbors who lived in a tower. And so they're screaming at each other. So, and all of the workers, partners were standing behind him in a semicircle and like, not egging him on, but just like making sure nothing happened to him. So I made them all go back to work, and it was just me talking to the guy and the one who lived in the building across the street from the one we were building. And he's like spitting in my face, and he's screaming, and he's doing whatever, and he's like, I want to speak to the person in charge. And I said, that's me. How can I help you? And he's like, no, I want to speak to the person who's back in the office, who makes all the decisions, the person in charge. I said, still me. How can I help you, right? So all I'm saying is, and I talked about this a little earlier, is don't assume, right? I mean, people come in the office and used to think I was the secretary, or if I'd show up and I took minutes in a meeting, they thought I was there to take minutes for everybody. I can I can tell you millions of stories like that throughout my 31 years in the business. But the only thing that we as women in the industry want is, one, to be taken seriously for the work that we're doing and to be treated fairly and equally as our male counterparts. So don't assume, make sure you're listening, ask what's important to that individual, and I can guarantee you they're going to work their tail off for you. So.
I love it. I write an editorial for Inside Construction in Australia, and I wrote one called Demolishing Unconscious Bias. And one of the associations over there, someone read the article and had me do a webinar on unconscious bias, and I almost fell out of my chair, the quantity surveyors, because they would have never done that before. I have one more word of inspiration.
I want to say one thing first. I'll let you do that.
Okay.
I look at it, it's up to everybody in here. When you see inappropriate behavior, call it out.
There you go. I got to tag on to that. And please link into me if we're not linked in. Think of the boldest, craziest thing you could do to attract, develop, or retain women, and try it. Just try something bold and crazy, because whatever we've been trying for the last 40 years, to go from 2.1% to 2.6% female electricians in 10 years, it's not moving needles. So I really appreciate everybody coming to listen, and I really appreciate Kim and Steve. Big round of applause for Kim and Steve for being on the panel.